Alrighty, we'll get started in just about a minute. Kind of seems like we are leveling off a bit as far as new folks coming into the room. Welcome, everybody. This is the Theory of Change workshop. We'll talk a little bit about building a theory of change together. Really excited for this session and to hear a little bit from you all, or a lot of it from you all, sort of about what makes our mission move and how we can better unify around a strong vision. It's 3:05 and I want to leave plenty of time for that conversation. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Keep dropping your introductions into the chat while other folks file in. And I'll start by introducing myself. I'm Dan Mueller. I use she or they pronouns. I sit on unceded Kumeyaay land, which is also known as San Diego, and I've been the EIJ strategist for Slow Food USA for about the last 4 or 5 months. Prior to that, I was doing some California projects development, and prior to that, leading with the Slow Food Urban San Diego chapter. So it's been an interesting evolution of my role and involvement with Slow Food. I'm really grateful for it, and even more grateful that so many of you seem to be so responsive and passionate about this EIJ work. So really excited to bring the theory of change into focus, not only as the primary deliverable for my role as an EIJ strategist for the 2022 year, but also a way to have really meaningful conversations about our impact and visibility in the community. And with that, I will introduce our network engagement director, Felix, to tell us a little bit about how we've arrived at this present moment. Felix?
Hey everyone, I'm so excited to be here. I also say I'm the network engagement director for another 6 days. Unfortunately, I'm so bummed to leave, but I started with the work that got us here to be talking about theory change is the proudest work I've ever done with an organization. And so I'll be telling this quick context, one, from my perspective, number one, and from the perspective of kind of Slow Food USA's office, because this is the story I can tell, because I want to say that, so I know the theory of change is going to be very much centered on justice, equity, inclusion, in that path. And our network leaders, our chapters, our working groups have their own journeys and have been pressing for this in Slow Food USA as a network for a long time. So I know that's the main story. And finally, we have the leadership from Anna, the board, other people to have this moment be the moment where we can truly engage on this work. So I know this story is not just Slow Food USA as a network, as an office story, but the story of our entire network and all our leaders to get us here. So quick context then, I think that just kind of hit ahead in the summer of 2020, right? When the Black Lives Matter, many emergencies were happening around dismantling racism in our country. And we were able to put out a statement about what Slow Food's position about racism culture is. It may have been a very public moment where people are like, whoa, what is this from Slow Food? This is something that's generally new. We have not done this in the past. And I think from that moment to this moment, a lot of conversations, a lot of mistakes, this is not a linear process, a lot of reiteration, a lot of like little networking, meaning connecting with people and doing work together and communicating with each other has happened. And I believe that the theory of change, with Dan leading this now, is our opportunity to not just put out statements, to not just talk about it, but what theory of change is that thing that's going to be like, well, if we're going to do something together, we have to know what that it is. And a theory of change will help our network figure out it's not just talk. It's not just us reading books, which reading books is good, but it's not just that. It's our network coming together and truly committing to justice, to equity, inclusion, by doing work together, because we can do things as individuals and there's a place for that. And we can do things as our local groups and there's a place for that. But what we need to take advantage of is the immense power, privilege, opportunity that we have as a nationwide network that's connected to an international network. And this theory of change is going to be the thing that brings us together to do that work. And I cannot thank all of you and everyone who's not here to have done the work already that we've done, made mistakes, made progress, so that we are able to start this conversation together. And I am so excited about what's about to happen.
Thanks, Felix. And I'm really excited as well. It's been super interesting to come from a chapter like Slow Food Urban San Diego, where I, as a BPOC leader myself, felt very heard and listened to and supported and empowered, and to come into understanding the rest of the network, and that not necessarily all BPOC voices and perspectives felt that way. So in some ways, I feel like I've been doing a little bit of bridge building, but all of that wouldn't be possible without some of the work that a lot of you are already doing. I think sometimes we have these really big, grand ideas of like what EIJ is and what it looks like on the ground. And it can be really simple as having difficult conversations and getting up on that anti-racism reading list. And that only takes us so far before we need something else that kind of, unifies us in our efforts together. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about the theory of change process. Brian has got some slides that he'll put up as I'm sort of talking through what we're hoping to get out of today. So our session outline on the next slide will highlight that. I want to give a short and sweet introduction to what a theory of change is and why, provide a little bit more context as to why we're choosing to take this process on at this time. The big chunk of this meeting is for us to actually conduct focus groups. So I've got some staff, I've got some network leaders who are going to co-facilitate a couple breakout rooms where we're going to ask you all some pretty intense questions that require you to do a little bit of reflecting on your slow food experience, as well as a little bit of visioning for sort of where we see ourselves going. And then we'll come back together, do some share outs from those focus group experiences, and talk a little bit about how this feeds into a larger strategic planning initiative that we're taking on at National Office. So we're literally here today to talk about building a theory of change together. And I'm really excited that so many of you have shown up to start off this journey with us. Our next slide will give us a quick primer in theory of change. So maybe some of you are hearing this for the first time. Maybe some of you are familiar with this in your own work or work that you're adjacent to, but I found this really great sort of 5-minute video that I think gives a great analogy to kind of root us into what a theory of change is and how it's practical for the work that we'll be doing.
What is a theory of change? Let's look at both words. The change in a theory of change is the change that an organization hopes to make in the world, and the theory is their idea of how this will happen. A theory of change helps an organization better understand what it is trying to achieve. In order to begin to understand what a theory of change is, let's start with a story. One day, looking around your living room, you realize you have a big problem. There is no place to put coats. You think, I'm ready for a change in here, and imagine a solution, a beautiful and functional wardrobe. Now everyone will have a place to put their coats. You look online and find the perfect one. You order it, but when it arrives, you realize there is some assembly required. Furthermore, when you open the box, you find no instructions. No problem, you are a smart person, surely you can figure it out. With visions of your beautiful wardrobe in mind, you make a plan. You set aside some time, gather tools, enlist a helper, and get started. You soon find out that there are a lot of pieces in this box, and it's hard to know which ones go where. You start with the pieces that seem easiest to fit together. But then what do? You don't make a lot of progress. Your wardrobe isn't turning out to be quite what you imagined, and you're wasting a lot of time and energy. Frustrated, you take a step back and consider your work. You think, my plan isn't working. I know what I want to build, and I've gathered the time, tools, and help to get this done, but I don't know how the pieces fit together. What if I could imagine the finished wardrobe in front of me and somehow take it apart piece by piece. By working backwards, I could see how my box of pieces fits together. So you try it. First, you see that there are three main parts: doors, drawers, and a cabinet. If you have these three pieces built, you can make the wardrobe. Now that you've separated the doors and drawers from the cabinet, you see that the cabinet has two parts, the top and the bottom. If those two parts aren't put together correctly, then the doors and drawers won't fit. Now that we have each part separated, we can see the individual pieces that each is made of. If you are missing any of these pieces, then you won't be able to complete the wardrobe. By the time you've finished working backwards, deconstructing the wardrobe, you've created a diagram of all the essential pieces at multiple stages that are needed to build the wardrobe. With this theory in hand, you can start your work of putting it together. Now you might be thinking, that's all well and good, but I'm working in a nonprofit, not building a wardrobe. Building a wardrobe is easy compared to the work of nonprofits. Building a wardrobe has a clear goal, discrete pieces, and one right way to put it together. It's easy to see when you didn't put it together right. Nonprofits, however, are continuously figuring out how to best address the most complex problems in our society. There's no one right answer, and it's hard to know if they are doing the best they can. Whether building a wardrobe or addressing world hunger, a theory of change helps a nonprofit better understand what it is trying to achieve. The ultimate goal a nonprofit is trying to achieve is described in its mission and vision statements. These statements guide all the work that a nonprofit does. Let's pretend the person in the story was a nonprofit. In our story, the nonprofit sees a big problem. There's no place to put coats in the living room. Their mission is to build something to put coats in. Their vision is a living room where everyone has a place to put their coats. The nonprofit had a clear understanding of what it was trying to achieve in the end, a wardrobe. But it wasn't enough to just start working with the end in mind. Our nonprofit needed more intermediary goals. Nonprofits, like the person in our story, do create plans for the actions they are going to make towards their goals. The largest of these is the strategic plan. In our story, the nonprofit made a plan to build the wardrobe, setting aside time, gathering tools, and finding a partner to help. These were all good, prudent decisions, but the wardrobe wasn't built. It would have been better to understand how the wardrobe went together first, and then, with that in mind, make plans to do it. There is often a kind of gap between the actions and the mission of a nonprofit. The actions are related to the mission, but how exactly? What connects the actions to each other? Are they the right actions to make towards the mission and vision? Do we have everything we need to make these actions? Would other actions be better? A theory of change is a powerful tool that helps an organization articulate the connection between their actions and their mission using the language of outcomes. A theory of change helps you define your intended outcomes and the connections between them, identify the why and how of your organization, create a foundation for evaluation, program development, organizational change, or strategic planning. Communicate more effectively with internal and external stakeholders. In the next module, we will look at real-world examples of theory of change and how nonprofits used it.
Your work can feel.
All right, thanks. So I've been doing theory of change work for a couple years now, and I just found this video, I think, simple, but also insightful, and kind of lays out some of the elements that can go into a theory of change. So I wrote a short little doc that I'm realizing now isn't necessarily published anywhere, but we can share the link and maybe get it where it needs to go. But basically, a theory of change documents the impact that our organization seeks to achieve, as well as the intermediate steps that are needed to ensure that our activities and resources are aligned with that change. So if you're interested in reading why a theory of change, we can definitely share that link. I think it's a great conversation starter. And this all sounds, I think, sometimes like a lot. It's like, oh my gosh, defining problems, thinking about resource allocation. There's a strategy piece in there. So what we'll talk about next is actually the process that we've laid out to make that not only simple for us as leaders, national office as the leader of this process, but also easy for you all to understand your opportunities for participation and engagement. So if we hop to the next slide, we'll see an outline of the process that we are envisioning and enlisting to help us achieve all of those goals that we just heard about in the video. So the first was to really spend some time, our EIJ design team spend some time mapping out stakeholders and kind of painting this picture of the slow food multiverse. Who is there? Who isn't? What do we need to learn from them? And also those folks who are on the periphery who aren't necessarily a stakeholder, but maybe we have something to learn or a direction to grow into. And how should we be engaging these stakeholders, these groups of folks in conversations around strategy, impact, visibility in our communities? So that was sort of the first phase. The second phase, which is what we're really launching into today per this Theory of Change workshop, is actually engaging the stakeholders. So we'll be sending out a survey that will hopefully go far and wide through social media channels. We're going to be facilitating focus groups with key groups. We're actually going to be doing some focus groups today. And we're going to be conducting interviews as well. So really trying to get a good mix of qualitative and quantitative data to come back and inform the next phase, which is synthesizing our findings. So we're going to compile all that data that we gather from you all as stakeholders, analyze it, create a draft, and then send it back out for a final round of feedback before we put it into the actual final, and I say final with quotes because there's some fluidity here, version of the Theory of Change product. So that process will take place over this next year, with I think the bulk of the stakeholder engagement taking place between Q1 and Q2, that synthesis and analysis phase, and sending out for a draft in Q3, and then the final version coming out in Q4 of, well, this year. It's 2022. Sometimes I think I'm still talking about it like it's the year to come. No, it's this year. So that's kind of like a high level overview of the process. And if we hop over to our next slide, we'll see what elements, right? So that's the process that we're enlisting, but what are the elements that we're really trying to have at the end of this process? So a theory of change can contain a number of different elements. The elements that we're choosing to focus on for this process include a refreshed mission and vision statement. And maybe, we have this vision of good, clean, and fair food for all, but that requires a little bit of teasing. Some of that has to be done at the local level with our communities, and some of it needs to be done sort of at this higher level. And so, refreshing those mission and vision statements, getting really clear on the problem statement. I think there are a lot of problem statements that come up when we think about our journey to good, clean, and fair food for all. So can we land on a general problem statement that allows us to then identify organizational strategies that help us move the needle on that problem statement, as well as how we'll know we've moved the needle. So what are some of the anticipated changes that we see coming as a result of having identified the problem and identified organizational strategies to tackle that problem? And then, of course, there's always this conversation, and I think we're encouraging the network to lead from this place even more so now, more so than ever, is that leading with values. So what are the values that are underscoring all of that, right? What values underscore our mission and vision? What values underscore our strategies and anticipated changes? Right now, I just have, these are just placeholder sticky notes to kind of get us started, but really there are probably additional values to inclusion, equity, and justice. And we look forward to articulating those as we move through this process. So with that, talking a lot about this process, I want to do a little bit of leveling expectations. So our next slide will kind of talk a little bit about do's and don'ts for this process, meaning what we can expect from this process and what we shouldn't necessarily be expecting from this process. what we can expect, or what we're asking of folks, is to really take the time to engage and also encourage others to participate. So you all will be the first focus group, the first formal stakeholder engagement that we conduct as a part of this process. Let others know that there's going to be other opportunities, whether that's through another focus group or completing a survey, and really encourage as many folks as you can to also get involved in this process. The second, which goes for any conversation we're talking about EIJ, is like, be open to and prepared for challenging and jaggedy conversations. We don't expect everybody to have super articulate, well thought out ideas. This is the time to throw out those half-baked ideas. Because it's our job as national staff and the stewards of this process to figure out what to do with the info. It's not your job to filter the info and make sure it comes out perfectly. We just need you to be open to discussing and brainstorming and visioning and reflecting in the same space. And as I mentioned, take these conversations into your communities and see what happens. I don't expect you all to take the focus group page with the questions and facilitate a full-on focus group with your chapter, but some of these questions might actually be really helpful in your own planning for the year as a chapter leader, or maybe it helps get the wheels turning on something that you've struggled with before or an area that you want to grow into. So take this with you and see what happens. The don'ts. So we cannot expect that this theory of change, the final product, or that this theory of change process is going to solve all of the cultural, directional, and organizational issues that we're facing. It gives us the way that I like to think about it is like, it's not about everybody like getting everybody onto the same page, but can we at least be in the same book? And can that book be something that we write together? That's kind of how I think about this theory of change process. It doesn't need to be overcomplicated, whether in the process or in the final product. The simpler, the better. There will be the happy medium of a theory of change is to be part diagram, part content that points people in the right direction of where they need to go. So we're going to try to navigate that and keep it simple as possible, because it should be something that, our leaders have in their back pocket when, they're facing a number of situations, starting new partnerships or new relationships in the community, beginning new projects. This will be something that you can just, quite literally take out of your back pocket and have there. And last but not least, this is not the end all be all. We shouldn't necessarily be expecting closure or certainty from the conversations or from the theory of change document. It's a fluid process. We are looking for feedback and input at multiple points throughout the process, and the product itself will be dynamic. So it will be living. It'll be something that we can, that's hopefully not only useful, but that we can revisit and gives us the flexibility to course correct when we need to. So with that, I want to go ahead and see if anybody has any questions before we head off into our focus groups. I hope this has been insightful. And yeah, questions, comments. Go ahead. Shirley, did I see you have your hand up?
Oh, are you talking? Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is that, yeah, and I know this is a discussion and so forth, but beyond this, beyond the information and asking for information, how far does our involvement in this process go? Will the commission or committee or whatever group you have, will they be giving the membership updates? Will they publish the changes? I'm not sure where we go beyond today. Is
Sure.
it just in today?
No.
For us.
Right. No, today is really just the beginning. This is just our launch point. And, like I said, we'll spend the first 2 quarters of this year just listening to you all, reflecting, getting a sense of what it is you all are dealing with as leaders and what you view some solutions to these grander problems that we try to solve are. And I would say you can expect maybe like a midway update saying, hey, this is generally sort of what we've been hearing from you all. So that will probably come between Q2 and Q3. You'll also have the draft to respond to in about Q3 before the final version is out in Q4. So right now it is you're joining these discussions like the focus groups that we'll be doing today. You'll be helping us get the word out about the surveys. If there are other folks that we should be spending time with, we certainly are still compiling that list of stakeholders and people we should be learning from. So what we're doing right now is, yes, getting info from you all by you all participating in focus groups. What we're also doing is inviting you all to be a part of the process. Who else should we be talking to? What else should we be trying to learn? Are there any stones that we need to turn over or doors that we really need to focus on pushing open before this work can truly take off and root down? And we're asking you all to be a part of that. So your formal involvement is mostly, yes, surveys, focus groups, interviews. The informal involvement is keeping these lines of communication open. And if there are ideas that you have about where else we can be reaching, what else we can be learning, we certainly welcome that as well. And expecting those updates, those periodic updates from the EIJ design team as we report back on what we've learned. Does that answer your question?
Sorry about that. Yes, it does, Dan. Thank you.
Okay. Great. All right. Do we have any more questions before we head out into our breakout groups? I'm trying to do some quick math. Looks like we have 21 participants here. That's including hosts. Give us just one moment, folks, to get our breakout rooms up and running. It looks like we're probably going to have about 2 rooms. Okay, that's great. And there'll still be space to put some people in if they come in later. I should have started this session by saying this is one of the longer sessions because we did want to spend most of our time hearing from you all as leaders. So this session is set to go from 3 to 5. If you're not able to stay the whole time, that's absolutely okay. But we wanted to give ourselves plenty of time to introduce the process, answer questions, and then also get you all into the rooms chatting about these impact areas. So yes, 3 to 5 PST. Thank you, Mara. So why don't we go ahead and split off into our breakout groups? I think we'll just do rooms 1 and 2. So it looks like Mara and Ashley will be taking breakout room 1. And then why don't we go ahead and have we can maybe do a bit of shifting here. Why don't we have Felix? Yeah, we'll go ahead and have Felix and Cedar take room 2. So the breakout rooms will be opening shortly. And you'll be assigned to your breakout room and your facilitators will take it over from there. I'll be floating around to answer questions and be of support. So yeah, why don't we go ahead and open our breakout rooms and get going in our breakouts. Breakout groups. It seemed like it was going pretty well. I hope you all were able to dive in and have some meaningful discussions and maybe meet some new faces while you were at it. We have about 18 minutes left in the session. So what I wanted to do was spend some time doing a bit of a share out. So talking about some of the lessons that came up in your focus groups, and then spend a little bit of time giving a little feedback on sort of this process and how it felt. And then I'll kind of show you all, like, theory of change is one process that kind of cascades into a series of other processes that inform our strategy and sort of how we view our role in a broader social change ecosystem. So that's what we'll spend this next little chunk of time doing. So Brian, do you mind go ahead and pulling up the slides, because we've got our prompts there. And I would love to especially hear from our leader voices, if our facilitators also want to chime in and just kind of maybe some things from those first 3 bullets are standing out. So talking a little bit about what did you learn, maybe even relearning or remembering some things, because we did a little bit of reflecting on our slow food journeys up to this point. Were there common themes emerging amongst you all? Was there something kind of different that you heard being tied in that maybe not necessarily a perspective you share, but something you can relate to? And also, you know, I recognize, and I think we recognize that these aren't your average, everyday, easy peasy questions. So if you want to reflect a little bit on how it felt to do that, reflecting and also visioning at the same time, we'd love to hear a little bit about that. So yeah, who would like to share what was going on in your group?
I can share a little bit. I really just wanted the thing that seemed to resonate with everyone that kept coming up was the idea of authenticity. And sort of the thread that seemed to run through that is being willing to be on a learning journey, and slow food really being in that process, which we've experienced from the last, I don't know, I've been involved for 6 years, so I feel like just seeing that story arc and change was something that kept coming up. Authenticity and being willing to change.
Does anyone from my group want to chime in? I can do it. I feel like one of the main threads of our group was how School Gardens has been an amazing way to connect to all the different elements that slow food is trying to, the good work we're trying to do. You know, you can engage with the food on a growing level. You can engage with the children, so you teach the next generation. You also get the joy of understanding, you know, where your food comes from, but also you get to eat the things. And that, like this, there was just so many folks in our group that had connected to slow food through School Gardens. So that was a really fun thing to recognize. And then also that the one thing that slow food has now that we've identified is that the joy and the justice, and that's so different from other organizations. And that the general consensus in our group is we should really heal into that joy piece quite a bit more. It does set us apart as an organization. What am I missing, team?
I think, Mara, only the global piece, which I didn't get to say before you ended, but yeah, that we, you know, we can all do our things in our local places, but that we are a global movement and across this great big country in Turtle Island. So that's something that we really have that no one else does.
As I'm scanning the notes too, I'm just seeing that accessibility, really broadening access to all folks felt like a big theme in our conversation too.
Was there anything that came up that folks were surprised to hear? Maybe whether that be in the content or just that someone else was maybe thinking the same thing you were thinking? Any surprises or points of intrigue?
I was not really surprised, but I was so encouraged by in our group Rachel, who started her business not that long ago, and how she found a lot of really, encouragement, but also practical help within the organization for having a food business, for having a ranch. That's really important. That's meaningful, if you as a business person can find that kind of support somewhere that's worth your time spent with that group. So that was really encouraging to me, and I was a little bit surprised.
Anything else that anyone wants to share before we move into our plus delta?
I'll just share real quick. I think I was surprised. I mean, I knew a sliver of it, but I was surprised that Shirley and some of the team in Las Vegas sort of felt alone as they started their chapter, given that they're part of sort of Mountain and Southwest, but often, I've heard on some other calls, a lot of their members feel more of an alignment, or leaders feel in alignment with California. So trying to figure out as we continue this work, how when folks do come up in places that we haven't been or haven't been in quite a while, how we can be, even more supportive, and understanding that they don't have the same network as in say a California or a Texas or a New England, where there's other existing chapters around nearby.
Something I also want to mention that maybe someone else from my group wants to speak to is the recurring theme of relationships and returning to relationships. That is part of this movement.
Yeah, Ashley, in our group, you had a really great way of putting that same concept, that industrialization and colonization have disconnected humans from these vital and spiritual and nutritional resources, but that slow food is really, I think, the good work, or what, Ashley, you can say it better than me, but you really evoked this sense in me that you said that slow food's really aiming to help reconnect people to those original spiritual and physical resources that they have been taken away from. Did I get that right?
Great job. Thanks, Mara. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it. I really liked the way that you framed that. Like, we've been separated from it, and maybe slow food provides a way back. And when we're doing this work well, I think that that's a possible way to think about the work we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I think just that, again, like that will look different everywhere in different communities, depending on who the people are and what the history has been and all of those things, but just providing support and space. And I think storytelling came up a lot too, that connects with the relationship building, but to reconnect all the parts.
That is really beautiful. I love, I think that'll be a really great piece or good thread for us to hold on to when we're actually constructing our theory of change and imagining those connections and what it feels like. What does it look like? What does it feel like to be reconnected and decolonized? I think that's a really beautiful vision. So thank you for sharing that. We've got 8 minutes left. I wanted to see if anyone had already been thinking a little bit about what they really, the plus delta. So plus meaning what you really enjoyed about this experience of being in the focus groups and kind of working through these questions, and the delta meaning something that could change. So how could we improve the focus group experience for other folks who are going to be coming in and participating? So if anybody has a plus delta that they'd like to share, that would be really great before I get into our closing for tonight. Is it Lisa?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
The thing that I really loved is just the thing that I continue to love about slow food, and that's all the thought partnership and collaboration and just getting ideas out there, and the great sound bites in our group, just here and there from other folks. And I took a ton of great notes here. So for me, that was great. I don't have anything negative to say. I'm hoping, you know, as a chef in the industry, watching where the money goes in food and farming and regenerative ag and distribution. And I have a little heart project that's still forming, but I would love to see how how slow foods could be an access or a resource point for connecting some of those themes, you know, or I don't know how. See, it's still kind of loose here. It's forming, but I need to journal about it a little bit more to create some social change in that area. I think that now is a good opportunity to build a lot of awareness. And I think that slow food has an amazing ability to do that. And yeah, I've been chewing on it for a while, especially during COVID, watching our local farmers and ranchers suffer, you know, with distribution and supply chain backlogs and their meat going bad as it's waiting to get butchered, and, you know, all sorts of things like that. So I would love to see how slow food could lean into that and create a more, it's a big ask, I realize, but just bear with me, just create a more equitable system for everyone, you know, and how we can bring voices at the table and really get everybody in a collaborative space, you know. And anyway, that's all I got. That's a lot. I just wanted to offer it out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's a lot, but we start somewhere. And I think a lot of these conversations have illuminated there's a lot of really good stuff going on. So how do we figure out a way to continue weaving that together? And I think, you know, access and equity will certainly continue to be, I think, values that guide not only this process, but the work that we continue to do. So, and it's not too big if we all are working on it together. So keep baking the idea. Jaggedy for now is absolutely A-okay, and appreciate you sharing that, Lisa. Shirley, go ahead.
Thank you. When an organization as large as this one is begins to make changes, I feel like people need to, well, first you have to identify the issues, but I think that people really need to be coached on visioning, on how to articulate a vision, because it's easy enough to talk about what you know and what is, but what's your dream, or what's your what do you want to change? And we're very comfortable about talking about what's good, what works, what's really great. We're less comfortable talking about what isn't working, what we need to change, and why do we need to change it. So that's just my 2 cents.
Not just 2 cents, Shirley. You really, I feel like you're a paid segue in this theory of change workshop. That was so incredible. Like, that's exactly it, right? We have to get comfortable on naming what's not working so that we can fix it. And we also have to tap into those other pieces, right? That Ashley was mentioning, the intuitive, the spiritual, the emotional. Those are all things that help us do that visioning. And we can't be cut off to that if we're going to be bold and we're really going to think outside of these oppressive systems that we're participating in. So the imagination, the heart work, you know, how do we listen and lead from a place that's beyond logic? It's all here. And I'm hoping that this theory of change process helps do some of that priming work of getting us in the mindset of reflecting and visioning in the same space and being bold when we do that. So absolutely, it's a beautiful 2 cents for you to have chimed in as we're nearing the end of this theory of change workshop session. So thank you. We do only have a couple minutes left, so I want to I mean, I feel like we could just end on that note, but you all will be getting these slides so that you can go back through and take a look at these resources, and hopefully it'll be helpful in keeping those dreams and those visions alive. But we won't go into it now, but the last slide kind of talks a little bit about how we continue to be in that visioning space and that dreaming space, right? It's like theory of change in this process is just one step along a series of other steps and processes, right? I think of them more as processes and practices, because we never really arrive. We're never really done dreaming. We're never really done visioning for the future that we want to see. It just changes and adapts depending on who's in our community and who's not, and where ultimately we're going. So the last slide just kind of articulates a little bit of that. We have our theory of change that will help us figure out what our roles in the social change ecosystem are. What is that change? How can we be adaptable and accountable to that as it alters? Because we're not meant to, just as we have seasons from Mother Earth, no organization or project or program is meant to be stagnant. It's meant to also rotate and change and have seasons, which is, you know, part of what's informed our planning at national office as well. So I hope that these conversations help spark some of that dreaming and visioning energy, helping us realize some of these other connections to the spiritual and emotional that we need to really lead from values as we continue doing this work. And with that, I will go ahead and say good evening. I really appreciate everybody, your time, my co-facilitators for helping make it happen. Thank you so much. And stay tuned for more opportunities to engage in theory of change and to fine tune our collective visioning and dreaming skills. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone. The survey link is in the chat. If you could take 2 minutes to give feedback on this session, that would be really appreciated. And we will be in touch. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all. Take care.